Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes and this video was supposed to be the next update on my latest project, Heidi, my hearing aid beige Mk2 Escort. But there's a part that I'm going to purchase from Speed Shack in West Drayton in a couple of days. Shout out to Steve at Speed Shack. And I want to get that part before I make the next Heidi update, because then that's going to mean that everything's going to come together in the way that I would like for the next Heidi update. I have been working on a couple of bits behind the scenes in my shed for Heidi, and I've also collected her inlet manifold and exhaust manifold from the guys at Microblast Services. Shout out to Alan and Sam at Microblast Services in Windsor. So stay tuned to the channel for the next video for a Heidi update. But plan B in terms of what I wanted to do in this video was to crack on with a job on this car to solve a fault that I was made aware of by the guys at Southall Discount Tyres. Shout out to you guys when I took this thing down to see them recently to get some rear tyres fitted. Alright, so I ended up taking a trip to my zinc platers to drop some bits off, so I've got even less of the day left to crack on with what I want to do today. But as you would have seen, I've now got Esther jacked up and I've removed one of her rear wheels. I will remove the other wheel later on, but the problem that I want to try and deal with today is only on the passenger side. Now, when I went to get these brand new Yokohama A539 tyres fitted to the rear of Esther, the guys at the tyre shop noticed there was loads of oil on the back of this wheel. Now, it's obviously clean now because they very kindly cleaned it off for me when they were doing the tyre swap. But if we look under here, you'll see that we have some oil leaking out of the bottom of inside the rear drum. Now, that's obviously diff oil coming out of the rear axle, and I'm pretty sure I know why it is leaking. And it's actually something that I was supposed to address at the end of last summer, but totally forgot. So let's take this lot apart and investigate. Alright, so I hope that's coming across on camera, but you can see the oil leaking out of there, and that plate is obviously what holds the half shaft into the rear axle. And basically when I fitted these half shafts, one of the O-rings on the bearings got destroyed as I was pushing it into the axle. Will the half shaft pull out easily? Yes. Alright, so what's happened is the brake backing plate has come away from the axle, but the half shaft hasn't slipped out from the middle of it. And I actually think I might have tried a different O-ring last year when I did try and address this, which I'm glad I'd done that rather than putting a load of sealer on it, because it means I won't have to clean a load of sealer off today. But yeah, this O-ring is basically too thick, so when I've tried to rectify the situation with that O-ring, the half shaft would have gone in and the O-ring would have just, you know, stayed outside and not done its job, which is probably why it's now leaking. I may as well just destroy this O-ring, which is going to make it easier because it's not doing its job anyway. Or I can push it off there. I need to push the brake backing plate backwards. That's it. And then pull the half shaft out. And I'll just use one of the bolts to hang the backing plate in place, because I don't want to put strain on the brake pipes. So yeah, we can pull this out now. And there is the O-ring that I tried to fit before, but it's just way too thick. So the half shafts that I'm running in this car are proper beefy uprated ones from my friends at Retro Ford, not to be confused by the ones that I put in Maud, my Mk2 Escort, that snapped These are way stronger. And Esther's setup actually has the, is it 18 or 16 spline? So, you know, a stronger spline bit here, and then the spline bits in the LSD are obviously different to suit. But yeah, apparently this setup fitted to Esther can handle 300 horsepower, and she doesn't even have 200. So, you know, easily strong enough for my application. But yeah, you'll see down here on the bearing, there's a little groove for an O-ring. In my spare room, I have a replacement set of uprated shafts from the other company for Maud. So today I had a brainwave and thought, well, why don't I borrow one of the O-rings off of one of those half shafts? And yeah, I want to put the correct O-ring in there this time, which, fingers crossed, will mean that diff oil won't keep coming out of my axle. I grabbed the borrowed wheel bearing O-ring, slid it onto Esther's half shaft, and then made sure that it was fitted into the groove on Esther's bearing. Then it was just a case of putting everything back together, starting with putting the half shaft back in the axle. But there was a problem. With the O-ring in place, the bearing wouldn't slide past the backing plate for the brakes. So I slipped the O-ring back off the bearing, then pushed the half shaft past the backing plate for the brakes, then slipped the O-ring back onto the bearing from behind the backing plate. I wasn't going to be able to visually watch the half shaft go back into the axle to make sure that the O-ring stayed in place because the backing plate was obscuring my view. So I bolted everything up before whacking the half shaft into the axle, hoping that that would force the O-ring to stay in its position. Alright, so job done. I'm relatively confident that I've now got it in there with the O-ring still in the groove in the bearing. You know, I couldn't physically see it because everything's in the way at the point that the half shaft goes into the axle, but you know, the O-ring wasn't able to slip past the backing plate, which is why I sort of took the O-ring off and put it back on behind the backing plate, and then with the backing plate up against the O-ring essentially before I push the half shaft in. To me, that means that the O-ring can't slip this way through the backing plate, which means it must have stayed in its groove. So we'll see. I'll monitor it and, you know, just keep checking if there's any oil dripping out of here. But yeah, I'm quite confident that that's now sorted. I have just whipped the wheel off the other side to just double check that this side isn't leaking. Took the brake drum off as well, and there's definitely a bit of a trace of something in here. But I mean, I'd already wiped it off camera, but it doesn't feel like oil consistency. If anything, it might be the grease that was probably put on the bearing when I fitted the half shaft, and then that sort of accumulated with brake dust. It definitely wasn't sort of a drip of oil, so I'm pretty confident that this side isn't leaking. So yeah, I'll just give that a clean with brake cleaner whilst I'm in here. And one thing I do want to do while the wheels are off is clean these inner tubs, because they are really minging. I mean, we've got tyre and mud and dirt all over the nice blue paint, so definitely want to clean that up. On the passenger side, the tyre used to rub around here. See that patch there? And last year I did coat that area. I can't remember whether I just primered it or whether I actually did blue it. I think I might have blued it. So while it's dirty, I can't 100% confirm that the tyre isn't rubbing anymore, but when it's clean I will be able to confirm that, because just before I coated that area that was bare metal before, I raised the rear of the car up slightly by removing the pads that go on the rear leaf spring setup. It's worth noting that this piece here looks a bit bent, and that's the issue I've got with Maud, with her axle, although it's way worse than this. So at some point, maybe I need to strengthen this axle, which is what I intend to do with Maud's axle or with another axle, and then do the swap. And then once I'm confident that Maud's axle is how it should be, then I'll rebuild my LSD again and maybe give those replacement shafts from the other company a chance in Maud. But if they snap again and take out my LSD again, I'm not going to be happy. But that's for another day. Right now, I'm going to clean these inner tubs, and I might actually go a bit further and clean some of Esther's underneath while she's jacked up. Well, unfortunately, I've had to cut my cleaning session short because I've run out of that Acrosol. I have got a load of the Kent Europe brake cleaner, but I don't really like using brake cleaner on paint, even though I think it would be all right. So, yeah, I'll have to clean Esther's undercarriage properly another day. But it is good to see some blue paint in her inner tubs again. But, yeah, still plenty of tyre and whatnot to get off of here. And yeah, the other side is pretty much the same. Looking way better than it was, but yeah, still work to be done. I can now confirm that it looks like the tyre is still hitting this, even though it's nowhere near as bad as it was before. I think before, this whole bit here, you know, like this thick, was bare metal, whereas at the moment, I mean, I'm looking at it through the camera screen, but just looks like a little bit of the blue has worn off. Yeah, and there is a tiny bit that is fully bare metal. Yeah, tiny little patch here in the middle. So it's definitely better, but it is still rubbing, unfortunately. So maybe I'll look at raising Esther's rear end a little bit more by fitting some slightly thinner lowering blocks. These are 1-inch lowering blocks on Esther, and she's got the rear leaf springs decambered by 2 inches to give a 3-inch drop overall. So yeah, I wonder if I could get like a 7/8 of an inch lowering block in the back. I want to run her as low as I can, ultimately, especially seeing as I can run the front as low as I like nowadays, because I've got the Gaz Gold coilovers. Alright, so if you watched the last video, you would have seen me fit this adjustable rod for the slave cylinder on the clutch on this thing, and I've just removed it because I'm going to shorten it a little bit. One of you guys was asking in the comments how short I shortened it last time, and yeah, it's less than 5 mil, I'd say. But yeah, I'm going to shorten it another good few millimeters and see again if the noise goes away. So yeah, now you can see it's probably around 10 mil shorter now. So we'll see if this makes a difference. Just lock this off. And now I'll throw this onto the slave cylinder. All right, just testing the clutch. And I understand this is very much deja vu from the last video, so apologies for that. But yeah, it appears that the noise has gone away. But as we know from the last video, we can't confirm that the noise has gone away until I've done a few miles driving this thing. But yeah, right now I'm actually going to revisit another thing that I mentioned in the last video. Alright, so in the last video I raised this catch can up a bit, and I've done it a very ghetto way by just using a longer bolt and stacking a load of nuts. So yeah, raise it up literally as far as it will go without this fouling on this, which is one of the air intakes that Gary Ball put into this carbon fibre bonnet. It does actually touch this. It was at the stage where the bonnet wouldn't shut, and I just bent this down slightly. So it is literally as high as it will go, but it appears that no oil is coming out of that filter now. Now, I'm not sure whether raising this up is the reason for that. I do nowadays run the car on the minimum level in terms of the dipstick with the oil. And I noticed when I was under there just now messing around with the slave cylinder that there appears to be quite a lot of oil now coming out of the sump gasket. Let me show you. So yeah, there really is plenty of oil coming out of this. You can see loads of it on here, look. Really bad. But to be fair, I tried to bodge putting sealer on this sump gasket. Didn't really think it was going to work. It seems like it semi-worked up until now. So maybe now that the sump gasket's leaking, that might be why there's less pressure in terms of, you know, oil coming out of the catch can. I don't know. But yeah, in the not too distant future, I'm definitely going to have to redo this sump gasket. I've already got one. She's due an oil change, so it's not the end of the world. I've also already got another genuine Ford oil filter to do the oil change. And genuine Ford oil filters are, of course, available on my website at marcushayesuk.com. I'm going to wait until after the Classic Ford show. And whilst I'm doing that and doing an oil change and stuff, I may as well take the gearbox off and replace the clutch release bearing. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to set the gearbox up so that I can attach a return spring to the slave cylinder.
if, of course, me shortening that rod again today hasn't solved the issue with the rattly bearing. But yeah, right now, back to the catch can.
Once I'd gained access to the nuts on the back of the bolts holding the catch can bracket on, I removed the catch can from the bracket, and then I removed the bracket from the car. I grabbed a strip of aluminium and started making the new bracket. I wanted to raise the catch can the same amount that I did when I used the nuts, and once the bracket was marked, I used these grips to bend the aluminium and to cut off the excess by bending it multiple times. One more hole and one more cut, and the bracket was ready to bolt to the car. With the old bolt and nuts arrangement removed from the catch can, I drained it and then bolted it to my new bracket. But I wasn't happy with how flimsy it felt, so back off it came, and back out came the drill. And with one of the bolts repositioned, I put the can back in and it felt a bit more sturdy. When I tested the bonnet, it only just about closed, which meant the catch can was as high as it could be. So then it was just a case of refitting Esther's carbon fibre front grille and disappearing out of shot.
Alright, job done. Very simple bracket. It's stable-ish, and the bonnet just about shuts, so it's just as high as it was when I ghetto rigged it up with a load of nuts. Now, as is usually the case, I've got parts and tools scattered everywhere that I've been. Haven't put the rear wheels back on yet, and yeah, everything's where it was dropped. So yeah, I need to get this thing back together and then take it for a spin to see if that clutch noise has gone away. I know, deja vu from the last video, but yeah, I'm not going to know until I take it for a test drive.
Alright, so I seem to be falling into this habit where I keep telling myself I'm not going to take this car home after being at the garage. Keep telling myself that I'm going to switch the cars round and take Maud, my Mk2 Escort home, and then I end up changing my mind and taking this thing home. But the last 2 times that I've taken this thing home, even though I wasn't planning to, I've justified it because I've needed to test drive the car, right? Because I'm trying to sort out this rattle from the clutch. And up until about 1 minute ago, I was really convinced that the noise had gone away. But just like last time, after a few miles, the noise seems to come back. And to be honest, it actually feels like it's slightly more clunky when I'm changing gear now. So I think I've got to the point where, you know, if I'm shortening the rod anymore, I'm just making the clutch not release enough to change gear smoothly. So I think I've exhausted the idea of solving the issue with the adjustable rod alone. But yeah, to be continued on the clutch noise. You know, it is one of them things that's just trial and error, and I'm sure I'll get to the bottom of it. But ultimately, as I've said so many times, I'm just glad that the clutch is working fine. This very cheap friction plate that I put in last time seems to be holding up. You know, fingers crossed it lasts a relatively long time. You know, if it lasts just as long as the unsprung clutches were lasting, I'll be happy, because yeah, it's like a fifth of the price or a sixth of the price. You know, very cheap compared to these heavy duty clutches. And the power I'm running, I don't need these really heavy duty clutches. The only reason I fitted them is because the clutches in the past kept falling apart. But anyway, I need to get myself home now and go for a back and shoulders session in the gym, and then I'm going to try and get this video edited ASAP. But I also want to get back around the garage tomorrow to start the video that I'm looking forward to making on Heidi, my hearing aid beige Mk2. Before I left the garage today, I did finish up doing the valve clearances, which I didn't finish in the last Heidi video, just because Kat was waiting for me so that we could go to her parents. So I've done that, so I'm now ready to dive into what I'm planning to do next on the Heidi. But yeah, this video is definitely one of those where I feel like I haven't done enough, but you know, it was a sort of plan B. I was planning to dive into the next Heidi video next, and you know, I get so many messages from you guys saying that you'd love the videos to be more frequent, and you know, I'm trying to find a balance, and yeah, just trying to put out as good content as I can and as regularly as I can. You know, I'm not one to sort of chase views, I'm not one to sort of adjust what I'm doing to suit the algorithm and all that. Although I've got nothing against people that do, that is the correct way to play the YouTube game. It's just that, you know, I just do what I'm doing, and I'm just grateful that so many people enjoy tuning in to my videos. But yeah, really happy that I seem to have solved the issue with the leaking half shaft. I'm pretty certain that, you know, that half shaft went in with the O-ring in its slot, so that's good. But, you know, it does seem like I do have quite an extensive leak from the sump gasket, but I kind of knew that that was going to come back around and bite me on the bottom anyway. It is what it is. The story continues. My life goes on messing around with my cars, and I will continue to film it for you guys that are interested. So I am going to end this video here. Massive thanks as always to everyone who's tuned in. If you did think it was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and share it on your social media to help try and spread the word about my channel. If you didn't think it was any good, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Check all the links in the description to my social media, my website, my email, and that sort of thing. Massive thanks as always to my patrons for your ongoing support. But yeah, other than that, I'll chat to you next time.